Go back 3 weeks and find me the bracket where somebody wrote Norway's name in the quarterfinals. You can't. Nobody did. When this World Cup kicked off, the conversation was France, England, Argentina, and above all, Brazil. The 5-time champions, the biggest brand in the sport. The team every neutral secretly wanted to watch and every broadcaster desperately needed to keep alive. Norway? Norway were the fun little side with the giant striker who nobody expected to hang around. Their last World Cup appearance was back in 1998. Before this tournament, they had never won a single World Cup knockout match in their history. They were a footnote, a nice story for the group stage. And on Sunday night, at MetLife Stadium in New Jersey, that footnote picked up the tournament favorite, held it over its head, and body slammed it out of the World Cup. Norway 2, Brazil 1. And the man who did it just stood there and smiled while an entire nation started to row. So let's talk about what actually happened, because this is so much bigger than one result. First, understand who Norway are, because the phrase plucky underdog undersells it and misses the point. Yes, they have Erling Haaland, one of the 2 or 3 deadliest strikers on the planet, a man who has scored 30 goals in his last 17 competitive games for his country. That part everyone knew. What almost nobody clocked was the team built around him. This is a side captained by Martin Odegaard, quietly assembled by Ståle Solbakken over half a decade, that had already broken new ground at this tournament by winning its first ever World Cup knockout tie against Côte d'Ivoire. They arrived in North America carrying no pressure, no expectation, and no spotlight, precisely because they aren't one of the glamour names. And in a tournament that has already seen Cape Verde terrify Argentina and Paraguay dump out Germany, Norway just delivered the loudest reminder yet that in 2026, reputation defends absolutely nothing. Why did everyone overlook them? Part of it is simple absence. A nation of barely 5 million people that hadn't been to a World Cup since the late 90s doesn't carry the mystique of a Brazil or a France, no matter how good it quietly gets. And part of it was Haaland himself. For years, the narrative was that Norway had this one freakish superstar stuck in a team that couldn't even qualify for tournaments. So people learned to treat him as a highlight reel curiosity, rather than the spearhead of a genuine contender. That framing was out of date, and Sunday was the night the rest of the world finally found out. Here's the part that should really sting for Brazil. Norway didn't win by parking 10 men on the edge of their box and nicking a smash and grab. They won by out-Braziling Brazil. Norway had roughly 2/3 of the ball. They completed 617 passes to Brazil's 279. Read that again. The 5-time world champions, the nation that gave the world Jogo Bonito, managed 34% possession and barely a coherent attacking wave all night, while it was the Norwegians knocking it around with patience and control, Odegaard pulling the strings like the game was being played at his tempo and nobody else's. Norway, on the night, looked more like the old Brazil than Brazil did. That's not an insult you throw lightly, it's just what the numbers and your own eyes both said. And they announced it early. Inside the first 3 minutes, Norway had the ball in the net through Patrick Berg, only for a tight offside flag, confirmed by VAR, to chalk it off. That wasn't a team clinging on and hoping. That was a team that showed up to win from the first whistle against the tournament favorite in a stadium full of yellow. Now let's be fair, because we don't do cheap outrage here, and this was not a one-sided walkover in the chances column. Brazil had their openings, and this is where the what-ifs will haunt them. In the first half, they won a penalty when Matheus Cunha was chopped down, a call the referee initially missed and VAR correctly overturned. The whole stadium expected Vinicius Jr., finally in the kind of form Brazil have been praying for, to step up. Instead, Bruno Guimaraes took it, a man who rarely takes them even for his club. chosen apparently on the back of some internal statistical analysis, and he stutter-stepped his run-up and rolled a weak effort straight into the arms of goalkeeper Orjan Nieland. Later, the teenage prodigy Endrick came on and was through on goal within seconds, only to take a heavy touch and poke it wide. So no, this wasn't a fluke. But football remembers who buried their chances, and Norway did. The turning point was tactical, and it deserves credit. At halftime, with the game cagey and Haaland barely involved, Solbakken didn't panic, and he didn't sit back. He gambled. He pulled off both his wingers and threw on Andreas Schjelderup and Oscar Bob, and the 22-year-old Schjelderup absolutely tore the game open down the left. He would go on to create both goals. That is a manager reading a knockout tie perfectly and having the nerve to change a game that wasn't losing yet. And once Norway had cracked Brazil open, they had the one man on earth you least want lurking in your box. Because eventually, inevitably, Haaland happened. For 79 minutes, he'd been patient, feeding on scraps, waiting. Then Schjelderup swung in a cross, and Haaland rose against Gabriel Magalhaes, the powerful Arsenal defender who has battled him for years in the Premier League and simply obliterated him in the air. He headed it with such violence that one of the strongest defenders in world football was left flattened on the turf, while Haaland wheeled away. 1-0. And then, deep into added time, granted a yard of space on the edge of the area, he lasered a low finish past Alisson for a second that was almost un-Haaland in its precision. 2 goals, his 6th and 7th of the tournament, pulling him level with Lionel Messi and Kylian Mbappe at the top of the Golden Boot race. And what a three-way fight that's become. Because these are 3 completely different weapons. Messi is craft and vision, Mbappe is blinding speed, and Haaland is pure, terrifying power, the kind that leaves a defender like Gabriel scattered on the floor. 2 chances that mattered, 2 goals, game over. And the reaction told the whole story of this fixture in 2 images. On one side, Haaland leading the now famous Viking row in front of the away end, banging a drum, thousands back home in Oslo rowing along on big screens, a whole country losing its mind with joy. He called it one of the most insane days in Norwegian history, and he meant it. On the other side, Neymar. He'd come onto a rapturous reception, tried a few step-overs, and rolled home a meaningless penalty deep in stoppage time before collapsing in tears on the grass. At 34, that was almost certainly his last shot at World Cup glory, dismantled by a younger, stronger, hungrier man. Brazil's players didn't even leave the pitch at full time. They stood frozen or slumped on the bench, staring at nothing, as if refusing to walk off could somehow make it not real. So let's take Brazil seriously for a second, because their failure is a genuine story of its own. This is their earliest World Cup exit since 1990. They have now gone 6 straight World Cups without lifting the trophy, the longest title drought in their history, and a 6th star looks further away than ever. Carlo Ancelotti, one of the greatest club managers who ever lived, was hired specifically to end that, and he couldn't even get this team to the quarterfinals. He brought an incomplete squad. Endrick at 19 wasn't ready to lead the line, the midfield ran on old legs, and even Ancelotti admitted afterward they need fresh young talent. His verdict was a shrug and a promise. He said, "We are going to use this defeat as fuel," which raises the uncomfortable question people have been circling for years now. Are Brazil still a great team, or have they become a great brand? The good vibes, the yellow shirts, the history, the global goodwill, all of that is still gold standard. The actual football hasn't matched it in a long, long time. And that brand question is exactly why this result is a quiet catastrophe for the people running the tournament. Let's be honest about how this works. Brazil are not just another of the 48 teams to FIFA. They are the single most marketable side in the entire competition, the shirt that sells worldwide, the name that spikes television ratings on every continent, the magnet for sponsors and casual viewers who tune in for Neymar and Vinicius and the Samba mythology. When Brazil go deep, everyone makes money and everyone watches. When Brazil go home in the last 16, a huge chunk of the tournament's built-in global audience goes home with them. So while the romantics celebrate a beautiful underdog story, somewhere in a FIFA marketing meeting there is a spreadsheet quietly turning red. This is precisely the result they feared. One of their crown jewel draws is gone, and in its place stands a small northern nation of 5 million people that most of the planet couldn't have found in the bracket a month ago. Which brings us to the only question that matters now. How far can this actually go? Norway are into the quarterfinals of a World Cup for the very first time. They've now gone unbeaten against Brazil in 5 meetings across the decades. And they carry a striker in the form of his life, plus a team that just controlled the ball against the 5-time champions. Solbakken, being a sensible Norwegian, refused to get carried away, saying only that they're in the last 8 and they'll see. But his players know what they've done. Next up is England in Miami on Saturday, a bruised, 10-man surviving England that just crawled out of the Azteca by its fingernails. And Norway will walk into that game genuinely believing, because they've just proven the one thing this entire World Cup keeps proving. The badge on the shirt doesn't win the match. The team that plays better does. Nobody circled Norway. Everybody's watching them now. Be honest with me down in the comments. Did you have Norway beating Brazil? Or is your bracket in as many pieces as mine? And if you are enjoying the underdog carnage this tournament keeps serving up, subscribe and ride the longboat with us to the quarters.